Michelle.
Kim. How are you?
Good. How are you? Long time no see.
Good. I know, right?
We're both in the office at the same time today.
Exactly. Again, 2 days in a row.
Yeah, 2 days in a row. That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
exactly. Well, welcome back to the Business Chicks podcast, where we mix a little sass with a lot of strategy. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Kim. And tonight we're talking about a big one. And together, I kind of mentioned or forget to mention to say this sometimes, but together, Michelle and I have almost 60 combined years of experience in marketing, leadership, sales. For Michelle, I'm not a salesperson, sales and, overall business. And we hope to share and impart some of the things that we've learned through that time with you and every woman in leadership and really every woman in business. As I mentioned to Michelle when we were coming into the show, Michelle, I was talking to my hairstylist the other day. She was talking about, and I think sometimes I forget at least that we're talking to all business women. It doesn't matter whether you're in a boardroom, a company, your own company, a service industry, these lessons still apply, right?
Absolutely.
You most of the time you're dealing with the public at some level and or your own team. So she was talking about, my hairstylist was talking about this very subject. And that's before I even knew this was the subject of our show tonight. So every woman who is in any kind of leadership or even business position has felt, I believe, that tightrope between being liked and being respected, because they're definitely not always the same thing.
Right. So you push too hard, you're the B word. You're too nice, you're not strong enough. So it's that fine line, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you and I were talking about it prior to the show. And I know it's going to be an interesting one because you have different perspectives on this one a little bit, and this is actually one of my areas, I would say, not of weakness, but of area where I have to watch. I have to watch this one because of the leadership style I tend to use, which is the authentic leadership style. I subscribe to that theory, and it's not saying that that's the best per se. And it's really balanced, the authentic and transformational, which have two different approaches to all of this. And I would say you probably fall into more of the transformational leadership style. And both those two leadership styles are both very effective, but they're very different. And this is one of the areas where they're different. And so it's going to be interesting. So we're going to ask, or we're going to answer, hopefully tonight, do you have to choose between being liked and being respected? Now, I came across this video, Michelle, and I wasn't sure where to fit it in. So I thought, okay, let's start with this video because it is kind of interesting. And so anyway, I'll just let it play for a second. And it's this woman and this guy. I had never heard of Ask Ben, but I have really, really developed this affinity for him and the videos that I've been watching. And he speaks primarily to women, which is kind of interesting, right? Because it's a man speaking to women. And so the subject of this is how to speak louder without sounding bitchy, because that is one of the things, right, that we sometimes worry about is are we going to sound bitchy if we're loud and commanding, And so he talks to her about how to speak louder without sounding bitchy. Here we go. Oh, I got to turn the volume on. That would help. Hold on.
For women, a lot of the times in the work.
I feel like I'm angry.
Yeah, you sound angry. That's right. So difficult for women a lot of the times in the workplace. For men, we get away with it and they go, well, look at them take control of the situation. Often when women do it, they go, oh, that woman's being a bit bitchy, which is really difficult. So I just want to acknowledge as well for women, you're walking a much more difficult line. It is possible though. So here's the thing. When it comes to increasing volume without increasing bitchiness, you just need to add melody to that. Because if I increase volume, for example, I sound like a wanker too, right? So I'll be like, are you ready to get through day one? You ready? Great. Right? All of a sudden, sounds terrible, right? But if I say, hey, are you ready to start day one? Great, I am too. All of a sudden, it takes the anger out of it. So just do it. Hi, everyone, are you ready to begin day one? But like no melody, sound angry.
Hi, everyone, are you ready to start day one?
That sounds pissy. Good. Now try it with melody.
Hi, everyone, are you ready to start day one?
Perfect. Now here's the thing. All I'll say is, don't end on a high pitch, end on a low pitch.
Okay.
Because you lose credibility with that. And then sometimes people go, oh, this person has no authority. End on a low pitch.
But it's a question.
Yes, but I would still, you ready to start day one?
Hi, everyone. Are you ready to start day one?
Big round of applause. Well done.
So interesting, I thought. I'm like, wow, that is really interesting. So what did you think about that? Because that's your first time seeing it.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's really good. I like the way that, he does that. I think it's important where he points out the pitch and the inflections that we use. You know, part of the thing about, I'm a very loud person. So I just am. I grew up in a loud house. It's just who I am. And, it's
like our boss always goes, are you using your nightclub voice or your morning voice?
Exactly. Are we using the club voice? Yes. And I say, no, this is my natural voice. This is who I am. But it's interesting because it is the tone of how you say it too, right? If you go up on a high pitch, how it's not taken as seriously. Like it's just interesting how he kind of breaks it apart like that. And it's just the change in mindset again.
Yep. And it's, I mean, how many times have women heard, you're being shrill? And even if it's not, we naturally, I mean, I don't, you and I both have lower voices, I think, than most women, right? But a lot of women have higher voices just by nature. And so having that higher voice, I think it automatically kind of lends itself to that shrill. And the louder you talk, the louder you get, the more or less serious I feel like sometimes as well. And I feel like I've noticed, at least with my boss, the more I lower my tone, the more he listens, right? With our boss, our big boss, 2 up, right? The more I lower my volume and the slower I go and the more I get quiet, the better he listens, which I have found interesting.
So 2 things with that. So first off, it's interesting that you say that, but a couple of things with that I just know from, basically military scenario is when you speak lower, a little bit quieter in that tone, it forces people to lean in, and they have to lean in to listen to you. So they stop trying to talk over you because they're listening to you. What I have the issue with is I'm a very fast talker. So I have to like really, really think about the slowing down part. To me, that's where I struggle with that. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And, I mean, we've talked about this before, right? What's the sad part, Michelle?
So the sad part is that women have to think about all of these things. And we talk about this in every episode. Every single episode we talk about is women have to stop and think. And think. It's not natural. It's not who we are. We have to stop and think.
And remember, even Vince, when we had the what do women say versus what do men say, Vince was talking about the fact that he's like, I never knew that you women have to stop and think about all these things. Like, how am I coming across? Am I talking too loud? Am I ending on a high note because I want them to take me seriously? So I'm making sure that my voice is going down on the last note. It's a lot. It is a lot to think about.
It definitely is. And it's, if little things like volume and whether or not we use melody when we speak, alerts people's perception of us, then think about the big things like having to correct a problem, discussing an issue, navigating disagreements, enforcing policy. For me, it's procedures, and all these things we must do as we perform our daily work. So especially as we move, into senior positions and seats at the table, all of these things we have to navigate and think about every time we make that step.
Yeah, because it feeds so much into the way we are perceived. And we all know that perception is hard to overcome, right? Is whatever people decide they're going to perceive about your thoughts, your actions, behaviors, the volume at which you speak, they're building an impression of us, right? And of what they think we are and who they think we are and our seriousness and our ability and our capability. And it's so much. And, Harvard Business Review did this study and they looked at women leaders versus men leaders. And what is so strange is that as women go up in power, they're viewed, generally speaking, as less likable, and men are the opposite. As men gain power, they're viewed as more likable. And so, from the movies, here's one of the famous examples. And honestly, it has been a while since I saw this movie.
I love this movie.
It's been a while though, I haven't seen it for a very long time. But it's just interesting to me that, my hairdresser that I was mentioning brought up that she had run into this girl that worked for her, that was an assistant for her for about 10 years. And the girl was saying, when I first started working for you, I thought you were like, Devil Wears Prada, but I realized that you were just hard on me in the beginning. and you really helped prepare me for a really successful career. And so in that lens, I rewatched this clip and I was like, I remember, like, memory wise, first watching this movie and my perception of what's her name? Miranda. So my Miranda at the time, I was very young. I mean, younger, right? When this came out, it was, oh gosh, she's mean, she's cruel. I don't want to be that kind of boss. But I will tell you, I had a little bit of a different perception when I was watching these, 2.4 or 54 minutes of Miranda Priestley. So I'm going to play it. And then I'll let you talk a little bit about this movie so that we're not playing more than 30 seconds at a time and we don't get a copyright strike. So. Oh,
yeah.
I actually did confirm
Tales of your incompetence do not interest me.
What are you doing here? Well, I think I could do a good job as your assistant. And
You have no style or sense of fashion.
well,
now, do you notice how quiet she talks?
Yes. Yes.
I thought that was interesting because she talks very quiet, but something I don't think I noticed. I want to see, what do you pick up about just instantly watching this again, probably for the first time in a long time, about her behavior?
Just her insecurity. She's just very, she thinks the fashion side is a joke. Like, I know this from the movie, but you can see it in her face of like, she doesn't think what she's wearing is fashion, right? Because it's not in style. So it's that insecurity. I feel like that's what I see.
Yes, for sure. And then, I think, and that is 100%. I agree with that. Now, what about Miranda? Because that's valuable. And I think that goes to the next point. But I was kind of thinking about Miranda. What are you noticing about Miranda and the way she interacts with her assistant? And then I can't remember her name, but.
Yeah. So the whole, standoffish scenario of you're not going to be good enough. Automatically. I don't know you've just walked in here, but I can tell from looking at you that you're not going to be good enough.
Yeah, very dismissive, very just, like, I just don't have the time for you, right? And like you said, like, you're not good enough. And it just conveys in everything she's doing. It's like so dismissive. Like,
yes.
That's the thing that like just jumped out at me was, wow, she's like not overtly being mean, but her dismissiveness is horrible.
Which is forcing the awkward scenario, right?
And it's like, but then, like I said, that the next point that you made first that I hadn't really even picked up on is I think that contributes to her nervousness here and her insecurity is because it's almost like, you probably have had those times where you're like, I wish they would just yell at me instead of being like so coy, right? I think the coy sometimes, then you start going, what is she doing? Is she being me? Is she not being me? You start really second guessing your own ability to even interpret what the other person's thinking and saying and acting like.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I really think that is part of her intention is I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to be a bitch, but I'm going to make you just completely off kilter and not doubt everything about yourself by not giving you any, we're not having a two-way conversation here.
Correct. And I mean, I think that's the extreme with Miranda in this one, right?
Yep. All right, let's see how it continues.
I think that depends on what you're...
No. That wasn't a question.
Or college journalist with my series on the janitors union, which exposed the exploitation of...
But the problem is with that huge feathered headdress that she's wearing.
Actually, it's Andy. What kind of skirts do you use?
Please bore someone else with your questions. Where are the belts for this strap? Why is no one ready?
Here.
One copy. What are my twins going to do with that? Share? That's all.
Thought I had was enamel, bangles, pendants, earrings.
No, we did that 2 years ago. What else?
Well, they're showing a lot of florals right now, so I was thinking I could
Florals for spring. Groundbreaking.
But
See how it just continues? It's like she's not overtly mean most of the time, right? Except for
Right.
but in general, nothing that you could really call her on. She's not raising her voice.
No.
She's not. It's just she's definitely positioning herself as above them.
Right. So, and that's where the fine line is, right? Because as you watch this movie, for any of us that know what's happening, she's also this way because she has to present a certain way for the company that she's in and the industry she's in, because it's very cutthroat. So to her, she has to be this way, right? So it's something that's taken a hold of her as she's come up through this for her seat at the table.
Right. That's a good point. Like if she doesn't do it, and that's kind of the pressure on all of us, right? And as you grow in your leadership, you feel like, if I don't, if I let them see weakness, what is that? Never let them see sweat, never let them see weakness, or they'll bite your throat or something like that. And that's true, right? And so sometimes it's hard to know where that line is between, especially, my very first job, I've told you, I was overseeing over 100 different people. And that's such a different world than say 5 or 6, right? Because 100 people, you can in your head almost divide them up like, okay, you're going to have this many people that take advantage. You're going to have this many people that are always going to do their job. This many people, if you give them a little bit of an inch, they're going to take a mile. So trying to make sure that you have a persona, a presence that adequately not controls, but directs that many different type of people, it is very challenging, because that's when you usually do end up like her, or like some semblance of her, because it's too hard to figure out who you've got to be for each group of people.
Yes. Yeah. So it's easier to, take that social penalty, I guess, or hit, right? To be on her side, to be on the closed off side more to me, because you unfortunately in this scenario, you can affect a broader base by being in that closed off scenario than being in that nice scenario in her situation.
Right. Because again, she's not overtly doing anything that's like HR worthy, right?
Right.
She's not screaming at them most of the time. She's not calling them names necessarily. She's not doing anything that's overtly, forbidden and going to get you in trouble with HR if there was HR above her. But it's in general, she's just not creating a workplace that would be a whole lot of fun. I would say.
Exactly. Right.
All right. Let's let it play for a little bit longer.
I thought that only the first assistant went to the benefit.
Only when the first assistant hasn't decided to become an incubus of viral plague. You'll come and help Emily. That's all. Please.
Hello. Oh, thank God. You're there.
Excuse me?
I need to talk to you right away. I've got technical late. I was going to tell you today, so I thought that maybe if I told you that you could fix it.
Do I smell Frisians?
What? No. I specifically told them that
I see Frisians anywhere, I will be very disappointed. James Holt. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Andrea. Everybody wants this. Everybody wants to be us. Go.
So yeah, obviously, clearly the extreme there with Miss Miranda, but it does kind of convey or portray the fine line that there is, that we have to walk in that whole likability trap. And sometimes it does feel like a trap. It feels like if I'm likable, then I'm setting myself up to be taken advantage of. I'm setting myself up to not be as efficient, not my team, not be as effective. So yeah, it's
to be stepped over,
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Be overlooked. If I'm
Mhm.
not advocating for myself, if I'm not, tooting my own horn, who's going to do it? I mean, I've heard that throughout my career from other women, and I cringe every time I hear that because, yes, to an extent, right? Yes, to an
Well,
extent, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I mean, even like, all of us who are well-meaning, even not to that extreme, right? Where we
Mhm.
want to do what's best. Sometimes it does come across,
Mhm.
a little bit of what you and I were talking about earlier as being too nice, too soft, too
Right.
whatever. So, then we take that social penalty,
Right.
right?
Yep.
For
Mhm.
being one way or the other.
Yep.
They don't have the it factor to manage
Mhm.
because they're too nice. They'll be,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Or you have, I mean, like we were talking about before the show, I tend to this is one of my areas where I'm constantly, not fighting myself, but battling, like making sure that I don't cross that line between too friendly, right? And too much of a friend, because using that authentic leadership style, I'm in there with my team, right? I'm empathetic. And sometimes I know to the extreme where then I have to circle back, right? And I have to redirect and recorrect course, especially because often still in business, if you're not working for a female CEO, if you're not in that position where most of your senior level bosses, as ours are men, sometimes the perception can be, well, if you're nice, you're going to be taken advantage of, right?
Right.
And then they start thinking, well, you can't be managing your team well if you're that nice, right? Or that's the perception that you're letting people get away with things. So, it's like, it's so hard, right? Because then sometimes women in that position who are afraid of being perceived that way will course correct and will become super hard and will then come across bitchy and or inconsistent, and sometimes they're bitchy and then sometimes they're super nice. Nobody knows where they stand or how you're going to act at any given moment. But in general, I would say women, when they, find themselves being perceived as bitchy, I think it's more of a problem in terms of the way leadership perceives the leader versus the way your team does. So let's say leadership, you're with leadership and you're kind of always, having to bring the problem to the table, and you are standing up for yourself and you're standing up for your team. Then there comes that whole she's a lot, right? So then we start softening our edges. And so we start being afraid of offending people because we don't want to be called, especially if it is in our nature to be liked or want to be liked. We don't want to be called the bitch. We don't want to be called the hard ass, or we don't want to be called the problem. So we start putting little smiley faces on emails, I'm guilty, or saying, I hope that's okay. Guilty, after direct statements. I'm getting better at that, and I think through our podcast here, I've been getting better at that, at realizing where I need to, stand up for what I believe in and not being afraid of being too much or being a lot, and letting that passion come through and really standing by my conviction. But it's hard because you still get in that mode where it's like, oh, I don't want to, I don't want to seem too bitchy, and I don't want to, like I did with you, read the email, make sure it didn't come across,
Right.
And so we start this early in our career, often, especially as women, because we're told, don't be, right? Don't be too much. Don't, like our show that we did about being too much. Don't ask for too much. Don't expect too much. Don't argue too much. And it's seen as arguing instead of defending our side, as it would be perceived often with a man. It's, well, you're arguing, or she's arguing, or she's being difficult, right? And it starts when we're junior. And unfortunately, if we don't end up with a good role model or really putting in the time and effort to correct it, it stays until we move into our leadership. And that's when it can really become a problem, because if we're too nice, people can take advantage of us, including our team. If we go the opposite way, swing the opposite end of the pendulum, and we become too, trying too hard, we become like Miranda in Devil Wears Prada, a little too bitchy. So it's like such a tightrope.
It is. And I mean, I think we go back to, the starting scene that you played is, when a man raises his voice, he's passionate. When a woman does it, she's emotional. And we've talked about this before in many of our podcasts, and I think this is where I struggle with it. And this is that I've never been one that I've cared whether I was liked or not. And so that's why I struggle with this one a little bit, because I do have a hard time understanding when, and I do try to work through this. I mean, I have 3 daughters, so I've worked through this many times, but I do have a hard time understanding why people who are so talented and confident get caught in this rut.
Yeah. It's difficult. It is. And I will say, I feel like looking back on my career, now almost 30 years, I have had very few, I would say, like failures or flops. For the most part, my career has been very successful, but I will say this has been the area where I at least internally struggle, right? I feel like I swing a little bit from side to side. It's like sometimes I can be too nice, and then I realize it and I do course correct, and then I go a little bit, to the other side. So I have had throughout my career a hard time finding that middle ground. And for me, I think it's that perception, I guess it depends on, like, I think it goes all the way back to childhood, right? And the way you're raised. And, I was very close with my parents, but with that whole children, and up until a certain point, children are seen and not heard. And, I was expected to behave, and, and I grew up in church. And so you had to be quiet and, during church, and you weren't running around rowdy. So I just really had this whole want to please, right? Want to please. And so I think it becomes so ingrained that even as you move into your career in leadership, all the way through, right? It's like if you have that desire to please, I think that somehow becomes mixed up with being liked, instead of realizing that you can please by being respected. And I think that's the core at what we're talking about here is, like, boundaries, right? Being able to set boundaries and firmly but kindly say, this is non-negotiable. And that's, I feel like I've gotten that way more in the last probably 5 years than ever. No, I would say 7. My last CMO role, I think I had to, because there were so many people at a distance during COVID. I found that being too nice was not going to work. The work was not going to get done. And so that's where I became better at setting boundaries. And I think that's kind of where it boils down to. But even then, when a man sets a boundary, people say, oh, he's focused. If a woman sets a boundary, that's back to she's being difficult. She's being a bitch,
Exactly. And that makes females from the start of their career to women leaders self-edit. So we monitor our tone, our emotion, facial expressions to stay, palatable, so that we're, everybody can tolerate us. And that's just the mentality.
Yeah. And it goes back to that, being too much, feeling like, either you're too nice or you feel like you're too much. And it's like, sometimes you feel like, where can I win? Right. And especially, there's even that whole resting bitch face, and I am like literally cognizant of it when I'm sitting in meetings, like back to that, we have to think about so much, like, what is my face showing? Because, our boss that's 2 up will read my face. He will say, what do you not like? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't say anything. And he's like, well, no, I can see it on your face. And it's like, I could never be a poker player, apparently, because not that I play it, but I could never be one, apparently, because everything shows on my face. But those are the kind of things that we have to think about as women. So, you said, okay, you've never really worried about being like, well, on the opposite side of that, then have you ever been told that you were too direct or you were intimidating, or, and how did that make you feel? If you're not worried about or not concerned about being liked, when you're told those things, does it bother you at all?
So I've been told that so many times. And honestly, it came across in a review one time, about that, how I make other people feel, about that they don't know, that I don't know how to take you or whatever, anything like that. And, my response is always that, it's business, it's not personal. So, I can't, I wasn't trying to make them feel uncomfortable. I was trying to hold them accountable. And I think that's where the issue lies. And, I wasn't making them comfortable enough, with my competence. I was, and there was the jealousy from them because of how well I was doing my job, just those different things. But I just wasn't that person. And it bothered me that a company would be bothered by someone else's feelings being hurt while I was doing such a good job.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that is an interesting point. And, as you're talking, it was making me think too. It's like, it's not only do we have to think about ourselves, right? We have to think about the other people and how many other people feel like they need to be liked, right? And so it's making, are we sending mixed messages to our team? Are we it's just so much, because if you're thinking about, like, let's say not even from a leadership level, let's say someone is listening to the podcast and they're not in leadership yet, and they're just in their work role, and they have leadership aspirations, maybe or maybe not, but they just want to be a high performer. I would say it's even more dangerous then. And it not only does it set a bad precedent, but wanting to be liked can actually result in, doing things that maybe you shouldn't do, or taking, somebody else's work, taking on somebody else's responsibility because you want them to like you, or not holding somebody else accountable that maybe you can't do your work because they didn't, but yet you're getting in trouble because your part isn't done. Those kind of things. It's like, it is a tightrope. It is a tightrope. And it's unfortunate that women have to think about that so much more than men, because I don't think men are sitting around thinking about these things. No. And that's not bashment. It just is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
We by nature are interpreted differently. And I don't know, honestly, that that's ever going to totally change.
No. I don't think so either. I think the best possibility we all have is for our daughters and future generations to understand their worth and own it, and take the power away from someone else using the word, like the B word. I honestly don't have a problem with it, and I own that. I own being that person, and I'm okay with it, because if that is a reflection that I am doing my job and I am holding others accountable, then that's fine. I have no issue with that, honestly. And if that's what people say, that's on them. And that's really what I think future generations, we need to be teaching, male and female, is it's not about being cocky or condescending or anything like that. It's about being confident in you and owning who you are.
Right. Yep. That's a good point. And, that boils down to emotional intelligence, right? And being able to be aware of your own emotions, and when they are valid and when they might be getting out of check, because we've all got bad days, we've all reacted, we've all underreacted. And so it's like, coming back to that emotional intelligence, working on our emotional intelligence, and knowing, hey, this is how I'm coming across. Is this what I intend? And making sure that we are portraying what we intend, what the perception that we are okay with, whatever that be, right? And that are congruent, I would say, in terms of inconsistent. Like, in other words, that we're not making people guess. If we're making people guess who we are, how we're going to come across in any situation, then I think there's definitely a problem. But again, that boils down to emotional intelligence. And, really the most effective leaders are going to blend warmth and competence, realizing that all of this, right, doesn't happen in a fishbowl. And the psychologists call that the double bind, being both liked and trusted, or in other words, respected. But it doesn't happen in a fishbowl. And what I mean by that is, in our desire, and I know you and I feel the same way, so I feel like I can kind of speak for you a little bit, but I'll let you address it in just a second. In our desire to make sure that we are not a doormat, we also have to realize that we can't take that too far, right? Like, my hairstylist and I were talking about the work ethic. Some of today's younger generations, and by younger, I mean new to the workforce. I don't necessarily mean age, but younger, new to the workforce, is, I should always feel comfortable. Like, I shouldn't ever be comfortable. I should always feel comfortable, and I should always feel good and I should never feel stressed or strain. And if I do, it's wrong. And, and you can't, and here's where that fine line comes in, right? You can't tell me what to do and you can't hold me accountable, because if you do, you're mean. So there's that aspect, right? Then there's also, and, protect my feelings, and some people would say it's millennials. I don't think it's just millennials. I think it's a mindset that has come out of, I don't know if that's a bigger story, the education system, I don't know, but it's a mindset where uncomfortable is bad and you should make me comfortable all the time. And if you're not, you're mean. And along with that, on the extreme of that has come, and I am going to advocate for myself because no one else is doing it. Yes, but, right? I would say, yes, but you can advocate for yourself and you should. And that is confidence. And that, in terms of likability, some people say, well, who, advocates for themselves is not likable because they're arrogant and conceited or whatever. I think where that comes into play, because that's kind of like the opposite extreme, is when you're so confident and you're so advocatory. Is that a word? Advocatory? I don't think so. When you're advocating for yourself to such an extent that you start to disempower others, then I think it becomes a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that but I don't know if that I would call that advocating for myself. I think that's kind of, because we know based on other things we've done, words matters, as far as how we say things, different things like that, adapting, different things. The advocation part to me, if you have to make someone smaller or make them feel a different way, you're not advocating for yourself. You're insecure trying to make yourself look better.
Right.
So, I think that there's that line of that, just like in Devil Wears Prada, where the other Amanda was, the first Amanda or Amanda 1, whatever the original Amanda, was making, Andy feel less than because she did not want the competition. She wanted to be the only one who was responsible for this, that, and the other. And so she was taking out on her what was being taken out on her from Miranda. So I think it's that vicious cycle, right? And so you have to there is again that fine line of what your true intentions are in the moves that you're making.
Absolutely. Because, and what brought this up, or what kind of brought this around, was, you saying you've never worried about being likable, but you are. And so I want people to be very clear. We're not talking about being unlikable. We're talking about that's not your driving motivation, right?
Correct.
That's not driving motivation. That doesn't mean that what I've seen is in some women, and I think they end up hurting themselves and others. What I've seen is taking that I don't care about being liked to an extreme where they use that as an excuse for what I would consider improper behavior, right? Where they say, I don't care if I'm liked. I'm going to, promote myself, and I'm going to, I'm going to make sure that I'm seen. All of those kind of things. That's a little bit more than not being, and that's the caveat I wanted to throw out there in case you're young watching us. That's a little bit more than not worrying about being liked. When we're talking about not worrying about being liked, we're saying that's not your sole driving motivator.
Correct.
That just means you actively worry or worry. Yeah, you know what I mean? So
no, for sure. Because I lead with empathy. That's my whole thing. The resilience and empathy. That's how I do everything. So in that, it doesn't mean that I'm not liked or I'm a complete B word all of the time. It just means that I fight for what I feel is right in that with my team.
Don't
with
back down.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, just because I'm concerned that someone's not going to like me. Now, on the other side of that, because someone is concerned about whether people like them or not, although does not always make them soft.
Right.
Because I would say the same thing for you. I know that that's something that we talked about earlier where, that is something you struggle with as far as being liked, but you are not the type of person that would step aside just because you were concerned about that if it came to the betterment of your team or the company or things like that. So there is that fine line on that side as well. It's not an all or nothing for either of these.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, I really, if there are young women, that end up watching this, I want them to understand that it doesn't have to be one or the other in terms of the way you carry yourself in the workplace. In other words, it's not, well, I don't need to be liked, so I'm going to do everything possible. Because then that is kind of being a bitch. If you're doing everything possible to promote yourself and nobody else, and you're like, I'm going to worry about me, then that is where I think sometimes that whole, either bitchy comes about and have a little bit of merit, I mean, because it's ultimately boils down to what is your intent, I think.
Yes,
What are
agreed.
you intending to do here? Are you intending to do the right thing? And if a byproduct is in doing the right thing, sometimes you're not liked, then that's cool. But if you're not intending to do the right thing and you don't care, then I think that's when there becomes an issue.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
And we have two little short videos that we're, going to kind of get to our ending here with. And they're two different takes on this. And I'm interested. I know you haven't seen them yet. I'm interested in seeing, after you watch the two different videos, your take on it. Because I watched the first one and I'll just wait. I'll play the first one and then we'll play the second one. But it was interesting because these are two different, these came across completely different to me. So here we go. Here's the first one. And this is a woman I'd not seen before either. And she has a lot of videos to women out there. And let's let this play real quick. Here we go. Hold on.
The next question was, how do we deal with other women who call strong women bitchy rather than assertive? And how can we get women on our side?
We have, for a lot of us, been conditioned and encouraged from a very early age to play smaller, to don't toot your own horn, be humble, just be grateful. Nobody needs to hear about all these great accomplishments because how will other people feel? So if you've been told that your whole life, you grew up in a family or a culture that told you it was boastful to talk about the good stuff that you did or to acknowledge the greatness or the progress that you've made, it becomes difficult to unlearn that in adulthood. It's not just a switch. You can't just flip a light switch and now feel good to acknowledge your progress and talk about that stuff. So that's one reason why when another woman presents as confident, she is perceived as cocky, because we have all these internal unconscious biases within ourselves that we need to unpack and say, okay, wait a minute, why did that just rub me the wrong way? Why did her acknowledging the job that she did well, why did that bother me? A little internal work about what does confidence sound like? Who does it sound like? What does it look like? Oftentimes, confidence is perceived as your standard white male default. And confidence isn't perceived as a woman, as a Black woman, as an Indigenous woman, as a woman of color. And so we need to unpack those ideas. We have to have uncomfortable conversations. So much of our conversations are surface level stuff where we avoid the issues that could be slightly confrontational, if you will. But really, it's just a difficult conversation that we can have with tact, right? We all know how to do that. So it's having that conversation with a woman and saying, why do you think the energy changed in the room when I just said thank you instead of deflecting praise? Have you ever felt like other women perceived you as cocky when you owned it? And what does it mean to own your accomplishments? And really having those conversations at work, one-on-one with family members, and interrupting the deflections of praise when you see it.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. My power supply wasn't working. So if you wondered what I was doing back there, I was trying to get a new power supply because my computer just yelled at me that,
no,
it's not working. And I was like, oh crap. Okay. So anyway, that's what I was doing back there. But what did you think about that one?
So I really like it. I think that what she is presenting is very important in that we have to have the uncomfortable conversations, right? Like this shifting energy when people walk in a room or, things like that, because that is something that we haven't had the uncomfortable conversations historically. And I think we just are, oh, you don't talk about that stuff. You don't do that. You don't. And I went through this just recently with almost all of my team. And, we had that time of the year where you have to go through, the reviews, things like that. And my team is amazing and we talk all the time. So that's not a tough time of year for them. But what I realized is that I have an all-female team and every single one of them rated themselves lower than I rated them. And it's interesting to me because I understand it. Because they're like, oh, well, I could work on that, or I can, well, we all could, but you do amazing here, And so I think that's something that is just to her point of, we're taught, we're conditioned to be this shadow person in all of this.
Yep. I liked the first, I would say 2 minutes and 20 seconds of hers. And then it started feeling to me a little bit more confrontational than effective. Like then and this is just my perception, right? And when you hear the second lady, you'll see, and I heard the second lady after that. And so I probably got my perception after hearing the second because after the first one, I just started getting a little, and I wasn't sure why, I started getting a little uncomfortable at the end of hers, right? And I was like, but it could be differences too, right? In personality, wanting to be like thing, right? Making people uncomfortable. But I started to get the impression near the end that she was more like, if you don't like the fact that I'm going to advocate for myself, then I don't care. That's kind of what, I got from her nearing the end. I think I was with her all the way until the end. And I think if we went back and watched it, you would probably notice it now that I said it. But she started getting a little bit of the head bob. And I'm like, wait, she's talking to another woman and I started going, wait a minute, she's getting a little, you can tell that she is getting that whole, I'm going to promote myself, whether it hurts you or not. And we can talk about it, but we're going to talk about it from my perspective, not yours. And I was like, okay, that to me brought about just that little bit of what kind of we were talking about, right? Is I think she was right. I think she was right in what she was saying. And that's to your, I think she was right in what she was saying. But as she started getting near the end, I'm not sure her motivation was correct. It's like she wanted to have that talk to tell you why you were wrong, not necessarily to really say, why are you feeling that way? And to boost you up. Like if you were having that conversation with me, right? I feel like you would be more along the lines of, let's talk about why you're feeling that way. Why are you bother, because we both know we're all for the success of each other.
Right.
If we were having that conversation, I feel like you would be more on a fact-finding mission about, hey, let's work on you. Why are you feeling that way? Instead of, hey, you're wrong. I'm going to promote myself no matter how you feel about it. And you just need to figure it out. That's kind of what I was getting from her at the end. So I
see what you're saying when she said, and I took it a different way.
Okay. So maybe that's
just
me.
So I took it a different way. And the way that I took it is, if you notice at the end, when she says, why do you have a problem with me saying thank you to a compliment instead of giving another one back directly? So it was as if she was being attacked for just saying thank you and not deflecting the compliment, which is what we tend to do instead of saying thank you.
Yes.
Right? We say, oh, you're great too. Or, oh, you did a great job on this too. Or, oh, whether it's true or not, it's an automatic response.
Yeah.
To people a lot of times when they're like, oh, I love your hair, or I love your outfit. Oh, you look pretty today. Automatic response instead of just being like, oh, thank you.
Right.
That sort of thing. So that's how I took it, was that she was trying to spin the narrative of why do I have to give back to you what you gave to me instead of just accepting the compliment.
Okay, I see that. I can see that. And see, that just goes to show that, how sometimes different things can be interpreted differently. I was with her until the end when I was like, why and you know, again, it just goes to different styles,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Why is she, instead of trying to defend herself, why is she saying, why does that hurt you? Like
Exactly.
Why
Right.
does that hurt you? Instead
Mhm.
of, you know, why should I have to, instead of, I guess it's just a different approach. And I think
It is.
for the second girl, I think the way this, and it's a matter of style, right? And that's what we're here talking about. When you hear the second girl, the way she does it, I'm like, okay. And maybe that's just a different leadership difference in styles of these two women, right? But it does go to show perception, because now I do see what you were saying. When I was just first listening to her, I was kind of like, why is she attacking her? Why isn't she trying to help her? Right. And so, but I see what you're saying now. Here we go. Okay. This is Terry Cole. She is also she's pretty well known on the internet about, you know, women's empowerment at work. And so she has a similar kind of thought process, but approaches it a little differently. Here we go.
Yep. And welcome to this week's tune-up tip. We're going to talk about being fearless in your career. Do you think that you are fearless in your career? And what would that look like if you were? As women, most of us were socialized to be nice, to be good, to be kind, we are bridgers, we are assuagers. So how does that play in the world of big business? If you're assertive and you're a woman in the
I got to stop this for just a second. You know what I just noticed? The difference for me is what the first guy was talking about, the harmony in her voice. She comes across as, it's easier to take her assertiveness from me, but it goes back to that melody. She's got a lot of melody versus the first girl.
She's softer spoken.
The first girl, to me, it goes back to that first video we watched, right? The first girl to me was loud and very brazen and had that strong one tone. I'm confident this is
right.
And versus Terry is using that melody to kind of mitigate what she's saying here, right? Still being firm, but she's having this melody to her voice where you're like, okay, she's still
more soothing.
Yeah. But she's still being assertive, but she's not making me defensive.
You might get labeled that you are difficult, that you are bitchy. People might not like you. Right. And if a man is assertive,
like how she just said that, people might not like you.
Right.
Like it's no big deal.
He's strong. He's powerful. These are double standards that have been around for a long time. And really, when you say who is to blame for it being this way, men, are men to blame? Really, it's both. It's men and women. It's women who don't assert themselves, even though they have crazy gifts and talents that they could be sharing, because they're afraid. So this is your chance to really take an inventory of how you are at work and make a decision that you want to become fearless. If you need other people's approval all the time, if you fear confrontation, if you say you're sorry when you're not, if you say yes when you want to say no, and if you take care of everyone else above your own needs, then you have the disease to please. And none of those qualities are really effective in the workplace. It doesn't work. If you need everyone's approval, that is not a good career plan. It does not propel you forward. If you wait in the wings and you hope that someone notices how incredibly talented you are, you could be waiting for a long time or for your entire career. So I want to inspire you this week to get honest about how fearless or fearful you are when it comes to your career. And can you be a little more fearless and a little less fearful? So if this tip resonated with you, I would love to have a conversation about it.
So I just, that to me, I can't believe I didn't catch it the first time around, but I think that was the difference. Is it kind of goes to show how important that melody that the first guy was talking about can be.
And she did not resonate with me at all.
Really?
I felt she's good. What her message is great. But for me personally, it got lost because of that. So I think that's
interesting.
It proves our point, right? To have us both be very similar in our leadership skills, very similar in our history of, industries and things like that, and to be very different in what we connect with in that.
Right. And if we can be then pretty much everyone is, right?
Absolutely.
Because if we can be that different and what we resonate with and the style that we resonate with and that we respond to, then that just goes to show how everyone is. And to a point that maybe we should all stop taking things so personally, because we can't control what other people are going to perceive as long as we are doing the right thing, right? We can't control, let them, right? Mel Robbins, back to Mel Robbins, let them, that what they think about the way we act and behave, as long as we're doing the right thing for the right reasons, what they think is not our business.
And doing it the right way. It doesn't, just standing up for yourself and doing those things doesn't give you the right to belittle or make someone else look less capable of their job. So, you know, doing it the right way as well.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, it's, and why does it matter? You know, one of the things we have here in the show notes that I put in there that it just blew my mind is that in 2023 Gallup study found that teams with female managers score higher in engagement and trust, but those same managers report feeling less supported and more scrutinized, which goes to the heart of what we're talking about. And maybe that's where it comes kind of like full circle, is let them. We can't, it's not our business what they perceive, as long as we are doing the right thing the right way for the right reason.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, we talk about different leaders and things like that, and it is all about how we come across in that. And I know we're getting close to the end here. So, you know, what do we do with this? How do we lead without losing ourselves?
Absolutely. And I think for me, what all of this, you know, I always feel like I leave our podcast with like my own little epiphany, right? My own little, like, I feel like it's as much for us. It's cathartic, right? My own little epiphany. And I think my biggest epiphany is, you know, start with respect, right? Start with respect. Make sure that respect is the primary goal. Respect of yourself, respect of your team, respect of your boss, respect of your coworkers. As long as you start with respect, you show warmth, you show kindness, consideration, right? And kindness doesn't mean weakness. Kindness means consideration, empathy, like you were saying. We speak clearly, we pause, we make sure that we say what we mean what we say. We don't need necessarily to soften things, but we just say what we mean, what we say. And we ask for feedback from people we trust. Like I would ask for feedback from you. We don't ask for feedback from people that we know are out to either make us feel smaller or put us in our place or make themselves feel better. We ask for feedback from the right people and we course correct if necessary. Ultimately, if we're doing all of those things, we don't need to spend our time worrying about whether others are going to like us, not like us, think we're bitchy, not bitchy, etc. Because ultimately they're going to think what they're going to think anyway, which kind of, because of their, you know, their values, their background, their history, just like what a little experiment that we just did proved, right?
Yes, exactly.
We have similar leadership styles, but we reacted completely differently to those two women.
Absolutely.
And that was eye-opening for me. And that wasn't even planned. If anybody's watching, that was eye-opening for me about why do we spend so much time worrying about being liked when we could be doing things that we think are going to be making us liked that are actually being taken the opposite. Like here's one example, and I don't think the guy that's on my team would mind me saying this, would mind me sharing this story, but we were talking about leaders. Steve and I were talking about leaders, and he was telling me about some female leaders he had encountered in the past, not at our company, but at other companies. And he was saying, you know, that he had the real business, you know, very all business leader. And she was very respected by the company, but nobody felt like they really knew her. Right. Then there was the opposite extreme, because we were talking about leadership from a male and female perspective. Then there was the opposite extreme that in a different company, again, not ours, but that everybody liked, that was a great person, that was always partying and everything, but nobody really respected that leader. And it made me think, even back then, I was like, you know, that's so interesting, because that one leader who's partying with the team and who's, you know, and being friends with the team probably thought that they were doing that to be liked, right?
Correct.
In a way, they were liked, but they definitely weren't respected. And so it just was interesting, because that's kind of the point I'm getting at here is that little experiment that we just did made me realize and like things we've already known, but kind of made me realize
Mhm.
that even if one kind of piece you can take away from all of this, if you're a person who, worries about or thinks about being liked, is some of the things you're doing that you think might make you liked could actually be, depending on
Mhm.
who you're doing them to, with, etc., could be having the opposite effect, and vice versa. The things you think might be making you not liked, being firm, being consistent,
Mhm.
being, holding people accountable for the right person,
Mhm.
is going to be things that are actually going to make them respect you and
Right.
ultimately like you, even if they might be, nervous about whether, you like them. It's just, again,
Mhm.
kind of goes down to the whole let them, right? They're going to think what
Absolutely.
let them. You just do the right thing for the right reasons, the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, command respect, be kind. It's possible to do both. That's what you have to do.
Yep. So we don't ultimately, I think, have to choose. We just do the right thing for the right reason, the
Mhm.
right way. And
Yeah,
that's it.
absolutely. And you're not too much, too strong, or too direct. You're just the right amount of leader for the right room, as
Yeah,
long as you're doing
especially
the right thing.
producing, right? If your
Mhm.
team is producing, if the company is producing,
Mhm.
if you're having success, then you've got to be doing something right. And, Mel Robbins, if you ever watch this, which I doubt you will, but I'm not trying to rip you off. I really respect that, because I think that it does boil down to that, is let them, so that's
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Episode of the Business Chicks podcast. So drop in the comments. Do you think women can be both liked and respected, or do we have to choose? Or, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Subscribe, share, and remember, being liked is nice. Being respected is legacy. And check us out on Spotify as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so exciting. Thank you for getting us there, Michelle.
All right. Have a good night.
All right.
Thanks,
You too.
everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.